evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Full Metal Tuxedo Podcast. My name is Gregory, yet again your host. And the last few weeks, I've been letting myself get lost in history again. I've been really enjoying writing scripts for the Tinfoil Helmet series. I have so many cool names for all my stuff. There was one thing that I sort of promised at the beginning of that series, was that I was going to lead up to basically solving the riddle of the Sphinx. And I'm technically doing that in this two-parter. But, you know, I've been writing two scripts at the same time because I want them to lead into each other in a really meaningful way. So yeah, I got a keyboard in each hand, a monitor on either side of me, and I'm just firing away with both hands at the same time like some sort of idiot savant. I don't know anything about anything, but I can write a goddamn script about fake history if it kills me. That's where my head has really been at lately, but, you know, I wanted to sort of shift gears, give myself a little break this weekend, and talk about something a little bit different with you guys. I really did enjoy sort of teasing you about what you can expect in that two-parter, talking about my theory as to the true origin of the Giza Plateau. I don't really take ownership of the theory. I mean, there's very few things that I actually present in that series that are entirely my own theory, but the way that I assemble it, the way I put it together, I think that is where my idea is proprietary. That's where my idea is unique. You know, there are a couple things that I take credit for, though, but I do love to brag about myself, but that's not, well, I mean, that is usually why we come here every other Saturday night. This is our Saturday night mass to appreciate me. No. Anyways, this, I have to admit, is the least prepared I've ever been for an episode of the show. I'm sorry. I apologize ahead of time. I didn't even warm up my voice. I don't know. You're probably going to notice it's going to be fairly inconsistent, but it's not my fault. It's not that I wanted to be unprepared. I actually had an idea of what I wanted to do for this episode. I sort of wanted to talk about just ghosts and my idea about the spirit realm and all that, because I did sort of touch on it a little bit in the episode about interdimensional cryptids, and I have alluded to my theory about ghosts and cryptids and aliens being related in some way, in that sort of way. So anyways, I was trying to get inspired to think about talking about that, and I am going to get into that in the next episode of the podcast. But what happened is I realized, oh, you know what was a really, really interesting sort of aspect of ghosts was the way that the Christians tried to propagandize about ghosts during the Satanic Panic. And that led from a little hard to say exactly when it started and exactly when it ended, but I know that it was going strong in the 70s. And even into the 80s, I remember there was just like a little taste of it left. But there was a lot of this clearly staged stuff where these clearly Christians with weird, because Christians had such weird haircuts in the 90s and the 80s, you could spot them from a mile away. They just had the worst haircuts. Anyways, these two Christians with terrible, even for the 80s, just terrible haircuts. And, you know, they'd interview different people. And it wasn't always the same people doing the interview, but that was just sort of the theme, is that you could tell it was a covert Christian pretending to be just like journalist or interviewer. A lot of really interesting stuff came out during that time around ghosts, where these accusations started to get levied, that there were these sort of occult groups that were faking ghost encounters in one way or another. And, you know, giving people, I don't know if you want to call it false hope or whatever. I don't even want to like bother with the accusations, because people sort of know what they're getting into when they join ghost groups like that anyways. Like, if you put your hand on the planchette on the Ouija board and you just know that there's a chance that somebody is going to take control of that thing and choose what you're hearing, you know? That's always the risk you run into whenever you're doing anything with ghosts in a group. But this one particular French-Canadian guy, and I'm going to focus on him in the next episode. He did this presentation with these two Christians, which seemed very, very staged. But there was some interesting concepts that came up in that interview about real spirits faking, pretending to be familiar dead people, like relatives, loved ones, what have you. And they were supposedly able to even project their voice, all of this. It sounded like total crap. But there are more concepts about that I want to get into. But anyways, what happened though is literally a half hour before I'm supposed to go live, I changed my mind. I'm like, wait a second. If I'm going to start talking about satanic panic stuff, before I even get into those interviews, what is interesting about some of those interviews is that some of them I think are legitimate, and some of them even I think are exposing real things. And even the ones that are fake, I think bring up really interesting points that need to be addressed. Because you guys know that I'm of two minds. That the believer side of me, you know, I do believe in ghosts. I've always, I don't remember a time that I didn't. But of course, the skeptical side of me refuses to believe in ghosts and just continues to remind me that it is a trick of my mind. But when it comes to the Christian stuff, I sort of have the same duality. Because I was raised Christian, and I went through, after that even, a very Christian phase. And if you follow me on my socials, you know, I use Christian imagery a lot. You know, that's sort of just where my mind is at. But I'm not a Christian. I would never use that word to describe myself again. I really don't even know what to call myself. I like agnostic, because no matter how much I end up believing something, there is always that half of me. It's just a part of me. But there's a part of me that denies it, continues to deny it. That, like, there's always that internal battle. But when it comes to I know I'm rambling. When it comes to the satanic stuff, because I went through that Christian phase, and you know, I sort of have all of that still very much ingrained in my head. I also consider those satanic panic style criticisms of things. So like, one thing with the satanic panic was really prevalent was people focused on music a lot. Like, all of a sudden, like, rock and roll was always controversial from its inception. You know, everybody knows the joke that first song that came out about how great it is to hold hands, and everyone freaked out. Like, that was real. America was a very, you know, they use the term Christian to describe it, and that is one way to describe it, but more specifically, it's like this prudish, closed off, fearful version of Christianity that the United States was like very deeply ingrained in. And I know there are parts of the United States that are still like that. Everybody was freaking out about music. But there is a part of me that agrees that what the Christians were saying is in the music. Like, a lot of it is in there. They're not wrong that, you know, there is a lot of what one might call occultism in the music industry. Really, all of my favorite bands use like thick occult imagery. I'm such a hipster. I don't really like saying what my favorites of things are, but I'm not such an absolutist when it comes to things that I enjoy. But I would say that my favorite band is this obscure Australian group called Ballpark Music. And on their Puddinghead album, they have a character that they call Puddinghead. He has an owl head that's shaped like an apple. He's wearing a green tunic with a red sash, red leggings, and golden details, holding a butterfly. It's just like, what the fuck is that, right? That's one very unique and clever way of drawing the Green Man, which is a nice little hint as to some of the stuff you can expect with my upcoming episodes of Tinfoil Helmet, History is a Lie. The Green Man is like this prototypical Jesus character that's prevalent throughout all sorts of pagan religions. There's all sorts of different versions of him. He was the original death and rebirth god, very closely tied to nature. His micro-narrative that he represented the death and rebirth of nature every year through the seasons, you know? You know, a lot of people think that he sort of evolved into Jesus, or he evolved into Osiris and the Egyptian god. Christians would look at that album cover and just say, oh yeah, that's like a false Christ. That's Satan. That's evil. And they're not wrong that it's a false Christ in, you know, through their worldview, in that it is literally a prototypical version of the thing that they worship, and so similar in so many ways, which I'll get into in my next episode of the History is a Lie series. But anyways, yes, right at the last second, 30 minutes to go, I'm like, I cannot just jump into Satanic Panic and talk about ghosts when the most prevalent thing about the Satanic Panic was the music. And even more specifically, probably the most iconic character to talk about the music issue was one man that called himself John Todd. Now, I'd be really surprised if there wasn't at least one of you out there in internet land tonight that has heard of John Todd. He claims that he straight up was a member of the Illuminati. He was a witch. He was an extremely high-ranking witch, whatever the hell that means. And he served on a board of, I guess, witches in the Illuminati, overseeing this sort of satanic shit in entertainment. A group of 13 minds that sort of ran it all. John Todd would go around to different churches in the United States, I assume selling tickets, but he would speak publicly at these churches, doing Q&As, talking about his own personal experience and describing the way that Satanism is intertwined into the music industry. At my, we'll say, most Christian, when I did believe maybe that this was a bad thing, even at that time, I didn't believe that John Todd had anything to do with any of this. You know, he was saying things that I thought might have been true about the kinds of stuff we see in the music industry. But it's so obvious when you listen to this man talk that he had just made all this up, and he's really just sort of riding the popularity of the Satanic Panic. And Christians were thirsty for this stuff at the time. It was like, this was their form of LARPing. It's just, they would congregate and freak out about how Satan is taking over all over the world. Hilarious. Like I said, rock music was the obvious thing to freak out about. So he had claimed a lot of different things, though. He claimed to have served as a Green Beret in the Vietnam War, but he was discharged. Apparently he did serve in Vietnam, but Wikipedia claims that, you know, his mental state wasn't really all that reliable. But yes, he claimed to have left witchcraft in 1972. So he was doing these talks basically in the mid-70s. And there are several tapes floating around. You can find them on some of them on YouTube still, but they're getting more and more difficult to sort of track down. Even when you use the proper search terms, his stuff doesn't sometimes come up until the second page of searches, and stuff that doesn't even have the words you've typed in will come in first. That's obviously the state of YouTube now, especially when it comes to taboo topics like this. Now, I would never promote this man, but some of the points that he brought up were sort of interesting. I joke around about the satanic imagery in music videos with my friends all the time. And, you know, I see it in movies too. Yeah, one of my movie buddies, I always talk about how, you know, a lot of the imagery in a lot of Hollywood blockbusters and is imagery, especially stuff around the hero's journey, is imagery about the apocalypse or that apocalyptic event that happened 12,000 years ago, which is, you know, another thing I'm going to get into eventually. But the question is this satanic imagery, is this really evil? Or, you know, worst case scenario, what they're doing is real, that they're doing real worship, pagan worship of occultic sort of deities. And the Christians are right, but, you know, it's not Satan. Like, is that a bad thing? What is really going on, though? That is the real question. Like, Katy Perry is a really good example. I don't watch a ton of music videos, but I do remember seeing a lot of really obvious occultic imagery in her stuff. I don't know the names of her songs off by heart. There's one where she's sort of in this like labyrinth, and that one is pretty rich. But I remember one time at the Super Bowl, she came in standing on a lion, and that a giant lion monster robot walked across the field with her standing on the back. So the Christians would look at that, say that's satanic imagery. That is the whore of Babylon riding the beast, as it were. And, you know, I guess technically under the Christian paradigm, maybe that is literally what they're talking about. But on the other side of that, the Hindus might say, no, that's Durga riding her lion. Or, you know, the Egyptians might say that's the Sphinx. You know, and they would all be right. That they're all using different terms to talk about the same essential theme in the esoteric, but they each have different connotations towards their description of it. So the one thing that sort of bothers me, like, here's my opinion. One thing that I always sort of get stuck on with Christians, and I don't want to rag on Christians here, because I have a lot of friends that are Christians, a lot of followers that are Christians. I have a lot of respect for Christians, so. But one thing about the organized religion that bothers me, and I'll never stop criticizing organized religion, is that they teach this fear, this closed-mindedness. And, you know, this is in the Old Testament and in the New Testament as well. But, you know, there's recognition that things like magic and being able to speak with ghosts, i.e. mediumship, things like that exist. And though there is an implication that it is a negative thing in certain places, there are other places where it implies that people were using those mediums and clairvoyants anyways. There's this one point, for example, I wish I could remember where, in the Bible it is, but God says, essentially, or whatever prophet was talking, says, something's about to go down. When this is happening, don't use your mediums and your clairvoyance during this time. Now, a lot of modern Christians would look at that and they're just saying, don't use mediums and clairvoyance. And they're like, yes, confirmed. But what that's implying is at this time, during this time, this tumultuous time, is it just means that during this time, they're going to be the least trustworthy. But it's implying that otherwise, they're being used regularly by Hebrew leaders, yet, you know, there's a recognition that they're only so trustworthy. And there's this idea, too, that sort of transcends through from the Old Testament to the New, that David, Solomon, and their descendant of David, the Messiah, could command demons. So demons are really not much talked about in the Old Testament. But in the New Testament, it's like they're the most important thing all of a sudden. And it is a really interesting flex that Jesus can come along and just sort of command them. And it's a really obscure element from the Old Testament that sort of implies that the Messiah would even be able to do that. And it was that David was able to command them, and Solomon too. People don't know, but the myth is that Solomon, using the Ring of Solomon, commanded an army of demons to build a temple for him, or build a structure. I think it was a temple, but it might have been his home. I can't remember. But demons are like the focus for Christianity, especially during the Satanic Panic. You know, there's the three main focuses of Christianity, really, to be fair, is that believe the message of Jesus and you'll live forever, you'll be saved. Demons are bad, and don't ever do anything, because if it's something that God says not to do, then that means it's demons. The third one is the apocalypse, obviously. The end is nigh, the end is near. I get to put on my the end is near sandwich board for one of my upcoming episodes of Tinfoil Helmet. I'm really looking forward to that. During the Satanic Panic, that was essentially what they were implying, especially characters like John Todd, is that demons are literally embedding themselves in the music, in the records. And when you're bringing them home and playing them, you're inviting those demons into your home. There was this very interesting novel convention during the 70s specifically, where artists were intentionally recording messages backwards in their work. Now, this is something that can happen accidentally, and people have argued that that's even a subconscious thing, where you can accidentally say something backwards subconsciously, accidentally telling the truth, for example, when you're trying to lie. My soundboard is really hot. It might have just overheated. All right. There were a handful of these backwards messages that were showing up in music. Led Zeppelin had some of the best examples. Sad Satan, you absolutely have to look up that one. I'm pretty sure that was Zeppelin. I think he was like hiding in a shed because he was dejected. Sad Satan. That was the message. That wasn't an isolated thing. There were lots of other albums coming out that had backwards messages in them. And there, is something to be said about hearing something subliminally and it affecting you. Can you hear something backwards? Does our brain have the ability to absorb information that way? Well, maybe if we listen to a song enough times, we really get it embedded into our head. Subtle things like that will sort of affect us. But that being said, very few of those messages were actually harmful. There was the occasional one. It was like, screw your parents, whatever, do bad things. But for the most part, it was just kind of edgy stuff. But you can see how people would sort of freak out, especially Christians, that all this secret messages, all these secret messages about Satan were starting to pop up in music. And even overt messages about rebelling against your parents and the glorification of drugs, that there was certainly a certain amount of corruption of innocence being glorified in music at the time. But was that a concerted effort to bring in Satan, to turn people away from the light and towards the dark, to embrace hedonism. Well, I can say that I've been on both sides of this argument. Not in that it was literally Satan, but that there have been negatives promoted. But now I'm not convinced that it was an effort to corrupt youth. Because when I look back at that, with my current mindset, like, I use satanic imagery just as much as I use Christian imagery. You know? I literally have a devil character that's on my shoulder everywhere I go. He's always correct, too. Isn't that funny? Like, gun to my head, if I had to choose a form of Christianity to say that I'm most closely associated with today, it would be the Gnostic understanding, which is really to say, like, some of the more early concepts of what Jesus technically was, or at least what his message meant, and sort of the reality around the situation that he was born into, that he created, that, you know, that he fought, because there was probably a real person, and a lot of what he was and who he was is completely lost in the modern New Testament. Like, a lot of the New Testament is Roman and Romanized, or even just straight up Roman propaganda. A lot of what I now sort of entertain spiritually, as it were, this Gnostic concept, is equally, as the Christians would call, satanic. You know, have I flipped over to the dark side? Am I now with a Lucifer? I mean, I certainly like enlightenment. I'm constantly learning. Every single day I'm learning something. I'm listening to a podcast about something I want to know more about, or I'm researching some aspect of history or the occult. I just bought a couple packs of tarot cards because I'm just inspired by the imagery of them. They're absolutely packed full of meaning. Like, you could sit there and look at one card for an hour and just pick apart all the layers of meaning behind each individual symbol. That's the kind of dumb, nerdy stuff that's fun for me. But as a Christian, I was told to fear doing that. That's satanic. That's evil. I think I played one round of Dungeons and Dragons, but, you know, I didn't really play Dungeons and Dragons, but I played quite a few pen and paper role-playing games that are essentially the same sort of thing, where you create a character and then go on an adventure. But Dungeons and Dragons was a huge focus of the Satanic Panic. People were absolutely sure that if you sit there and pretend that you can fire one damage lightning bolts at a giant crab monster in your head, then that means you're going to hell. It was the most ridiculous one, easily. If you've ever heard of Chick Tracts, Jack Chick used to make these little comics that were meant to be sort of left places so people could find them and be converted. Each individual one is so fucking ridiculous that it's funny. I did one with Bible Reloaded. I've shown clips of that in my best of video. Check out the Armoured Gregory YouTube channel, by the way. I've been uploading old clips and old episodes that from, you know, defunct stuff that doesn't fit on the main channel anymore. But in the best of episode, I show a couple clips of the Chick track I did with Bible Reloaded. I think they call their channel Hannah and Jake now. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but it would be cool if they still have the episode up, because it's so fucking funny. One of the most interesting Chick tracks is about Dungeons and Dragons. And it basically implies that it's a gateway to literally joining Satanism. So, okay, this is a point I sort of wanted to get to earlier, but I kept forgetting, because you know me, I have nothing prepared and I just ramble. Whenever the argument comes up that Satanism is bad, the first people to jump to the defense of Satanism are people that are literally from the Church of Satan. And, you know, to give them credit, the Church of Satan is actually pretty cool. I mean, there's different sects and different branches, and some of them are related to each other, and some of them sort of pay homage to each other, but they don't communicate well. But essentially, they all follow Anton LaVey's initial concept of Satanism, and it's really just kind of fine. Like, sure, they might do some sort of cringy stuff, or some stuff that's a little faux pas or kind of silly, but generally it's harmless. The best thing about it is that it's a great way for people that have sort of been torn down by the structures of life, their families and their schools and their religions, and they just lost all of their power, and it's a great way for them to get their power back. And for the most part, most people in this Church of Satan are even just atheists. They don't have any spirituality. They just want to be good people. And they want to sort of celebrate their hedonism, more or less. And that's not hurting anybody. And they've even been in some interesting political battles. Like, I was actually on their side when, I don't remember which state it was. There was a mandate to put the 10 Commandments in stone outside of a government building. The Satanists said, no, you can't do that. You can't just put religious stuff outside of a government building. There's a separation between church and state in this country. And they put them up anyways. So they said, okay, well, we're going to petition to have a Satanist statue put up. So they had a big Baphomet statue, which is pretty much identical to the one that I posted on my story on Instagram to promote this. That Baphomet statue was outside of that government building for a very short period of time before the Christians finally conceded and chose to have them both taken down. To which the Satanists said, that's fine, we'll take ours down. We just wanted to make a point. Which was like very cool, you know? Again, like you can say it's kind of lame, but I mean, it was really interesting. They did the right thing, and they did it using Satan. It really says a lot. You know, there's better examples and more examples. It really does sort of show this stark contrast of how destructive and damaging and awful Christians have been, especially in the United States, you know, in modern times. Obviously, there's worse examples like the fucking Spanish Inquisition. Jesus Christ. And there are worse religions today. You know, God, don't start bringing up Islam in the Middle East. I get it. But, you know, in the world that we live in, the Bible Belt is like the most closed off place. Spiritually, mentally, metaphysically. And their excuse for it is their love of Jesus. I've spent literally, 7 years now arguing that Christianity has done more damage than good. I think you guys know my position on that. So it is just kind of interesting and telling that under the name of Satan, there are these more genuine, more open, more giving, more generous, more involved, more forgiving, more accepting people. And they even sort of remind me of the kind of rejected people. Because that is, you know, I don't say that as an insult to Satanists. The island of misfit toys here. But I know that a lot of people end up there because they feel sort of rejected or dejected by normal society in some way. Again, it's a great place for people to get their power back. They're sort of like the rejected, sort of outsiders, the outcasts, the broken and forgotten, the left behind. And in all honesty, they're the Christian in me is like, those are exactly the people that were following Jesus around when he was wandering around, you know? Like, those are the characters that they say were hanging out with him. Now, using the moniker Satanist, you are sort of identifying as the rejected. Sort of the same way when you identify as like a shitlord or whatever. If you join a conversation saying you're a Satanist, you're basically telling somebody that you're a rejecter, and like a out and proud and happy rejecter of the Christian paradigm. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but when you do that, you are inviting people to sort of assume the worst of you. What got me into bringing up this sect of Satanism in the first place is that whenever these sorts of debates and conversations and arguments come up, this group of Satanists always ends up jumping forward and saying, no, Satanism is not bad. This is what Satanism is. And they're right about that specific sect of Satanism. They're right that the Anton LaVey Satanic Bible following group of Satanists are not about the evil that Christians say Satan is about. However, you can't deny that there are genuinely fucking evil people out there that seem to be organized and use similar imagery. Would it be fair to say that they are Satanists and that they are in fact embodying the version of Satan that Christians complain about? Would it be fair to conflate those two? Because the argument really is, when we see that sort of imagery in music and in entertainment and movies, like as a big film buff, like I said, that imagery is in all my favorite films. It's in Star Wars even. It's in everything. The story of the apocalypse, this occultic imagery, the hero's journey is just riddled with that sort of symbolism and imagery. Is it all bad if they're all conflated? Because under the Christian ideal is that anything that's not this one specific thing is in fact evil. There's the concept of the narrow path. You have to follow the narrow path. Any deviation from that is a path to hell. They sort of have this like light side of the force versus dark side of the force kind of concept where there is a good, there's love, there's Jesus, but then there's evil and darkness and hatred, Satan. But then they say the narrow path is just that one side. That almost doesn't make sense to me. If there is a narrow path, why is it not down the middle? I'll admit, I was always very aware of and fairly well versed in this sort of occultic imagery, the kinds of stuff that I bring up and talk about in my various series. Again, occult, esoteric, those words just mean like hidden, special, mystery knowledge. Like the Christians would hear the term occult or even esoteric and they'd whinge in fear. That's Satan. That it did take me a little while to sort of get over that fear. I'll admit, I don't talk a ton about the stuff that I literally am thinking about because it's so abstract and philosophical that really the best way to communicate these ideas is in music videos, in movies. There's a reason why they hide the imagery and lace the imagery secretly, as it were, into their art, because it really is far too abstract to literally describe. But I think that one thing that sort of makes me unique in that, I guess, is that maybe I'm one of the few that is not only researching that, but is talking about it publicly. Because, I have listened to several other creators that sort of dive into the realms that I talk about, but they only really reveal so much. And there is this sort of culture in the esoteric to keep all the secret knowledge you've learned to yourself, don't share it. Because people worked hard to learn it, especially in groups like Freemasons, for example. There's that myth that the higher you graduate, the more you're told. So, all those years it took you to learn something, you're not going to want to just turn around and tell somebody that walked in the door for the first time. You feel special for knowing it. I don't really feel that way. about any of the stuff I really know. And no, it's all true. The stuff I think about, the stuff that I mull over in my head. Again, it is like more philosophical. But when I can think of ways to sort of communicate it to you, and I can put it in an episode of Tinfoil Helmet, or I can talk about it at length in an episode of the podcast, I don't even really feel like I'm giving you anything that special. You know, I think the whole culture behind hiding that information is just really dumb. I think that so that's sort of the one thing that sort of sets me apart, is that if anything, I would have like a mandate or a motivation, as it were, to share as much of this with you guys as possible, because I think that's fun. Also, I like hearing your ideas on it, because I don't have all the answers, and quite often you guys bring up points, things I'd never thought of before, make connections I'd never made before. I always think that that's just so valuable. Another reason to keep doing this, because then I'm not in my own little echo chamber. I don't get so far up my own ass that I am unable to see outside of my own thinking. Again, it's sort of hard to find these videos. YouTube makes it more and more difficult with time. But there are a lot of videos out there breaking down some of the occultic imagery in... really good examples, honestly, are like either Super Bowls or like music award shows. That's when they'll do their biggest displays. Like Beyonce and Madonna come to mind, where they'll often dress like the Queen of Heaven and do some, you know, likely ancient inspired dance, and they have a bunch of imagery, usually an all-seeing eye, and if you start to know what images to look for, you'll start to recognize it more and more in these music videos. As cynical as I am, and as much as I believe that there are some powers that be that manipulate our perception of reality in some way, I don't think that they're trying to corrupt us. I don't think that there's much evil behind this. What I proposed in an earlier episode was, I think that the reason that they do it is to sort of brag to each other about how much they know. You know, certainly constantly exposing everybody to that imagery, it burns it in all of their minds, gets them used to seeing it more often. But are they doing that because they want everybody to be thinking about those images, or is that an evil thing? I really don't think so. I really can't bring myself to see the evil in it. You know, there is evil in the music industry, though, especially in the fucking movie industry. Oh my God, Harvey Weinstein. Tip of the iceberg. Tip of the iceberg. You know, those industries are evil. I cannot defend them. But the way that they treat their talent, the way that they use and abuse each other in the industry, there's no reason to fear every single aspect of a song or its music video. I have some clips here of John Todd, and I'm only going to play a little bit of them because the quality is so terrible. But I just wanted to give you an idea of the way that he talked, he would constantly like say, oh, I've just got one thing to say, I got one more thing to say, I got one thing to say here. There's almost very little confidence in the way he portrays his information. Like, he's not convinced that people will take him seriously unless he's extremely passionate and forceful with the way that he presents his information. That's sort of the way that, you know, I read it. But why I sort of want you to hear this is because this guy was not an isolated incident. There were like dozens of these guys in the 70s and 80s that would go around to different church groups and give lectures about how the occult or Satanism or witchcraft, God, they were so paranoid about witchcraft. I have a lot of, this is a weird thing to say. Is this the first time I'm saying this out loud on the podcast? I have a lot of friends that are, they're like witches, they're psychics, mediums, things like that. Even like ghost hunters, they all fit under that same realm. To think of any of them as remotely evil just does not compute to me, because they're some of the most genuine, beautiful people that I know. Though I can see examples of that kind of beauty in Christianity, like, overall, the two don't compare. Again, the things that the Christians tell you to fear hide only beauty and love, compassion, a place for the rejected to go, for people to gain their power back. I know witches that are closer to God than the vast majority of Christians. So anyways, John Todd, like I said, he claimed to be a witch. He claimed to come from witchcraft. He claimed to be a high-ranking member of some committee or board that affected the music industry. He claimed that they would imbue magic and demons into the music and onto the records. The man was insane. So yeah, there were... God, I'm going to definitely want to show you more examples of these going forward. I could even do classic Armoured Skeptic videos on them. Some of them are that ridiculous. You know, there was even a guy that in the early 90s that talked about Pokemon. Holy shit. No, yeah, it was the mid to late 90s. He talked about Pokemon being evil, that they're giving kids all these demons on their cards, and the video game, they're gonna go out and collect all the demons. Like, they're just fucking paranoid. And this one guy said he had a dream that he saw the Antichrist and that he was this incredibly beautiful man, and he was convincing everybody to change the way that they live, you know, ushering in the mark of the beast. And this guy literally did lectures. He went around doing lectures about a fucking dream he had, because it was very similar to what people consider the end times to be like. Like, how do you make a career out of that? Another guy, he claimed to be, I guess, I don't know what you call a warlock or what the hell, but he claimed that he used to summon demons and they'd like show up in his living room, and that all magic is demons. Any magic you're doing is really just a demon, and you're controlling that demon and telling it to do something for you. You're tasking it. Hilarious. That I think is, if magic is real, I think that there is that form of magic, but to say all magic is that is pretty fucking ridiculous. Anyways, I want you to get just a little excerpt of the kinds of claims that John Todd would make here. I hope you can hear this. It is really old recording.
The organization that I came out of is a cult in religion, not in purpose. Its purpose is political and financial power, complete world rule through finance, which they believe would control the political atmosphere. It's been called by many people the Illuminati. Witches call it Mariah. In the United States, it's called the Council of Foreign Relations. It has many, many names wherever you go. I met Dr. Rasmussen because he had come across it through the Masons. I've met people who have come across it through political things, through financial and banking, and wherever people have seen it, they have thought that's exactly what it was. It was either in one of those realms. I came out of a realm where I knew better. I came off of a council that was in charge of dishing money out and political orders. In my area, I had 5,000 covens. That meant I had 65,000 priests and priestesses. That wasn't the congregation. That was just the ministers. I saw a movie by Hal Lindsey on the occult where he said he believed there were 5,000 witches in the United States. There are 25,000 witches in Los Angeles City alone. So he was way under short. From the statistics that we are seeing right now, it is the fastest growing religion in the United States and definitely in the world. And the reason it is doing this is because it has its financial power, and it's because the Christians, most of them, do not know their word and therefore are afraid of it, and therefore do not witness to the people that are in it. And we have not had much success in the last couple of years because they have stepped up the death threats within the occult for people leaving. It's like a Berlin Wall. And the people are afraid to come out. When we were there, we were in a meeting one night where we had over 5,000 people in one meeting. In that meeting, 1,500 of them were initiated priests and priestesses of witchcraft that had attended the meeting. And hundreds came up and told ministers, myself and my wife later, they would come out if we could guarantee them a safe place to go until they were strong enough to be on their own. We didn't have such a place. We're trying to prepare such a place now. And if you're interested in helping in such a place, get with Dr. Rasmussen when he comes back from this trip. Communicate with him your desire on this, since he will be one of the few people who will know where this place is and be able to send people to it. It will be completely hidden and secret. We had one once before in Phoenix, and 3 people were killed there one night because some pastors interfered with the security of the place, and the occult was watching, and they came in and machine-gunned to death 3 girls and wounded the worker. The girls were ages 15 to 18. They do not play games, and this is why we tell the young people, don't go, because they'll tell you to come in, it's nice, it's loving, it's a brotherhood, and you get in, and once you're initiated, you find out it'll cost them $10,000 if you try to leave, but they'll spend it. That's the minimum bounty they put on anybody's head getting out, and they don't care how young they are. So it's not a game. It's a real world out there.
So the man was quite the fearmonger. This sounded an awful lot like Scientology in a lot of ways. And the fact that Scientology exists and does this exact thing, if not worse, where they initiate people into their religion, give them ranks within it, making you think that you have some sort of power or some sort of meaning, but your rank makes you less than dirt, that you are only valuable in existence if you still have association with that church and you still venerate it and confirm that it's true and telling the truth. And doing otherwise, well, that means you need to be harassed until you either change your mind or I don't know what the end game is. What is the end game with that? Just like, what do they think? What do they think is going to happen? They just continually harass somebody to the left. Anyways. And the other reason why I think that there might be some truth to what John Todd is talking about here is because there are victims of satanic cults that come forward, that tell stories about how they were abused, the crazy shit that they were forced to do. Usually young people, you know, even when they get out in their early 20s, their stories are mostly about what happened to them in their teens or younger, raised in just absolutely abusive environments. For what purpose, God only knows. These things do actually happen. So, some of the good that came out of the Satanic Panic was awareness about this. A handful of people ended up free, and because everybody was really interested in the subject at the time, they got public interviews on the news and stuff, which otherwise they may not have gotten. Their voices got heard. Some good did come of the Satanic Panic. But was John Todd just riding that wave? Was he a manipulative person that just wanted to gain some notoriety? Or was he really a good Christian that wanted to spread the word of Christ? Well, it's probably not the second one because he's in prison. Well, he's dead now. But he went to prison for doing a very, very, very bad thing that a Christian man would not do. You know, wow, somebody's saying that they're a good Christian, that is. Old skeptic, armored skeptic, would just dismiss this and laugh and probably even make fun of it. I'm glad I've grown up a little bit since then. Because even though there is a part of me that just simply refuses to believe John Todd and thinks that he's just a grifter that wanted to get famous off of this, there was a lot about him that just seemed dishonest. And the fact that he ended up going to prison for sexual assault really just does not paint him as a very good person, you know, selfless. And that's sort of ruins the whole image of why he was even spreading the message in the first place. And like I said, the vast majority of the talks that he gave were about the music industry, entertainment in general even. And he wasn't wrong that imagery and that those messages were in the work. And he wasn't wrong that there's evil in those industries. What I think is really weird is kind of how hard it is to find this stuff now. Luckily, John Todd hasn't been erased from the internet yet, but it is getting harder and harder to find materials like this. And again, I don't believe most of what these people say. And for the most part, almost none of them, I believe that they are the people or have done the things that they say they are, as in that they're misrepresenting their own character and their own role in the things that they're talking about. But that being said, I think that there is a smidgen of truth to that realm. I think I only really bring it up now because I want to be self-aware about it, because now I am like waist deep in that realm, you know? I don't follow any deities. I don't worship anything. But I do a lot of the things that, as a Christian, I was told to fear. And it's funny that I've been, right before I go to super chats here and then go to a quick break. But yeah, I want to be self-aware about it. Yeah, because like I said, I'm doing all the things that I was told to fear as a Christian. So one of the things that I think is funny is I've been uploading all these old clips and stuff to my channel just to remember. One of them was a short version of a ghost hunt that I did. I'm uploading the full version later at the end of the month. I think you'll understand maybe why I don't want it on the main channel anymore. But it's a really good video, and I'm really proud of that particular hunt because the results we got were so good. Yeah, there's never been a time I didn't believe in ghosts. And I've been on several ghost hunts. I've lost count. And I've picked up my radio and my ghost equipment and talked to ghosts dozens of times, just on random occasions. I'll just get bored and I'll just start talking to ghosts. Over the years. I don't mean I do it every week. I have these little phases where I get really interested in ghosts again. And like I said, I have buddies that do ghost hunts, but I've only recorded 2. I recorded that one with my girlfriend at the time, and then I recorded another one sitting on my couch for an episode of Tell Me More. And both of them were very interesting. And I think, I know you're going to cry pareidolia, but I feel like I have this knack for it. There's just this ease and willingness for the spirits to communicate with me that other ghost hunters seem to struggle with. And like some of that is my own bias, but even when listening to other ghost hunters work, there are others that are obviously way better at it than I am or get better results. Especially the people that are professional. I'm always really impressed with them. And it's, again, bias, yes. So that's very occultic. That's very satanic. Panic. Do not talk to ghosts. Don't talk to familiar spirits. Their mindset is that ghosts are all evil spirits pretending to be familiar, pretending to be friends or loved ones or relatives. So that's what I'm going to be talking about next time, is having that debate with myself for your entertainment, talking about whether or not diving into ghosts is potentially dangerous, and if the idea of dead people sticking around is wrong, and that the Christians are right and they're faking it. There's these shadow characters that fake it. This is an argument I've had with friends before, or a debate. Friendly debate, of course. Hopefully I'll be able to find some of the clips from that French-Canadian guy, because some of what he says is pretty interesting. If you guys are listening to this live, you're on the Armored Gregory channel on YouTube, and I edit these and upload them to the Armored Skeptic More channel. To have your voice heard on the channel, just send me a super chat. That's the easiest way to do it. I read super chats usually twice per episode. From Vanessa, thank you for the super chat. says, I can't listen live tonight, but I bet it'll be another great subject. Big love, Greg. Well, sorry to disappoint, Vanessa. This has been a terrible episode. Also, I have a separate Patreon for the Full Metal Tuxedo podcast. And if you join that Patreon at certain tiers, you can send me your super chats through the live stream insider chat. Now, Nuke says, you sound afraid to say what you mean, dude. Never be scared of knowledge. Worst case scenario, you are wrong. Who cares? It's nice being a people, dude. Too many people are afraid of criticism. Don't be one of them. Well, that is actually an excellent point. I was tiptoeing a little bit. You're not wrong. I sort of am a little bit nervous, I guess, to just fully say exactly what I think and feel about that realm. And it is only because I've only just started to give it a fair shake, you know? So there is still a little bit of that Christian fear instilled in me, that it is all evil and that I am doing the bad things now. That's part of it. Also, there is sort of just, it's silly, you know, that I believe in ghosts and I believe in the esoteric, or, you know, aspects of it, I should say. Maybe by the end of next episode of the podcast, when I actually can get into the ghosts, I'll try to round out my ideas on all this a little bit better. Plus, I also have friends that are on sort of both mindsets. But to be honest, like I said, I have a lot of Christian followers and patrons and you know, regulars and friends, and honestly, they all are extremely tolerant of all of this. Some, dare I say, fans of it. So there is this interesting aspect of people who identify as Christian, who actually enjoy this realm of thought as well, that, you know, will talk about ghosts or bring up, you know, forbidden knowledge or the esoteric. I love characters like that. People that don't have a single-minded worldview. Even though I'm sure it's frustrating that a lot of the imagery and language I use is Christian-centric, but that's just because that's the lens that I was taught to see this side of the world through. the strange and unexplained, the weird and mysterious. But I don't necessitate that it follow the Christian mindset. It's just the jargon I use. You know, I will admit that my mindset is more that than most of my other friends that are into the same thing. And I really like the analogy of the blind men describing an elephant, because it's in the different ways that we see the world and are sharing it with each other that really allows us to see a proper perspective of what we're actually studying and what we're getting into. Because, like, if you can't tell by now, how many episodes of this podcast have I done? Like, when it comes into the strange and unexplained, you guys know that I'm all in. Like, I'm a skeptic, and there's a part of me that says that it's all bullshit, and always will. But, like, obviously I believe that there is more to the world than the material. I think I've gotten that across by now. And you're right, Nuke, I have to stop being afraid of that. Let's hide away really quick for a quick little break. Give my voice a break. I've got 4 stories up. They're all new ones. I asked in the last episode. So that's the other way to be heard. Send me an email. This is the preferred way. If you've got a story, if you've got a first-hand account or second-hand account of something strange and unexplained, weird and mysterious that's happened to you, ghost, UFO, cryptid, or something else that you don't even know how to describe, please send an email to fullmetaltuxedo@gmail.com, and chances are I'll read your story live on the air. I do usually 4 every episode. And I got a bunch of new ones. Thank you guys so much, because I did say I'm running low. I'm running low still, though. If you're holding out on me, please send me your story.
The shadows aren't your friends, and the ghosts, they'll pretend when we're lost in a world that don't belong to us. We'll try and make a sense in things that aren't us, and we'll wonder why we don't speak.
All right, I am back. That was Samtar once again, ladies and gentlemen. I gotta give a shout out to Samtar. Thank you for letting me use your music for free. Check out Samtar's work. I've got a link to one of his songs in the description below. That song was The World Isn't Yours, but I opened up with a new one. I've got a new favorite. It's called The Ghouls of Eternity. I feel like he wrote that song specifically for me. It fits the theme of what I do so well. But speaking of ghosts, the lyrics of that first song, it brings up one of the concepts of spirits that I was actually talking about near the end of the episode. The end of the first segment, I should say, is that some ghosts are pretenders. You know, the idea that there are these spirits that sort of absorb other people's personalities and then sort of just pretend to be them. You know, that was definitely one of the fears that I operated under when I would speak with ghosts. But even in some of my earliest encounters, when I was the most skeptical, I'd have to say that if they are pretenders, they're goddamn good ones. And that even if there is some element of not deception, but inauthenticity to the characters, even then we may be able to derive some value, like they've become living, or not living, they're literally dead, but they've become like an animate memory, like a stored file of a living person that once meant something to people, and you can sort of reach over and get a taste of their personality. Like even that, sure, like it's not real, but there's still some value to that. But that being said, I'm past the point in my research into ghosts where I'm asking the question if they exist or not. Like I said, I'm all in. There is something more. That being said, I'd have to say that the focus of my research into ghosts at this point is to determine the authenticity to dead people sticking around to communicate with loved ones or to hold on to some familiarity of their past life. And I don't want to insult people who just assume or believe that they are dead people. Again, I have friends that are ghost hunters or psychics or people that are into the dead, and they fully believe. And they know that, you know, I question that. You know, so I don't want to insult people who just fully believe. Because I know some of you have strong convictions that you've spoken to your loved ones who have passed on, and that you've had some cathartic, meaningful sense of closure over that experience, and I would never want to ruin that for you. And I'd never want to say that wasn't real. But, you know, there are definitely different kinds of spirits. There's definitely more than one. And there's even more different kinds of ghosts. Conscious ones, and ones that are just like a play, or a video file playing on loop. It's not actually a conscious thing. It's just like almost like a memory of a moment in time more than it is a memory of the person that it's depicting. Residual hauntings, they call them. Let's get on to the stories here. So the first one is from Ashley. Hi, Gregory. So I'm a Christian. However, I don't usually go to church often. I used to go a lot when I was younger and always saw light emitting around the pastor. Sometimes it would be black or gray, but mostly it would be white light that occasionally colored tints, blue, purple, or yellow, at the ends. I don't often see auras, but it always happens when I enter a church of any kind or hear any scriptures from most faiths. Oh, different religions too. That's interesting. That was usually what I'd experience in a church, but this time was different. Uh-oh. Okay. I was standing beside my mother, sister, and grandfather, who is in a wheelchair. The pastor was reading out of the Bible. We're part of the Methodist Church, so, as usual, I saw the light aura on the pastor as he read, and those around me read along out of their Bibles. The aura was different, more faded and broken. It caught my eye, because I almost never see broken auras. It was very distracting. Then we sang a few songs of worship, and I watched his aura fade in and out. Honestly, it was making me very nervous. Then it was time for the prayers. Closed my eyes, and we began praying. However, I felt my left arm, begin to swell, and my right arm's hair stood on end. Suddenly, my back began to pain, and my legs gave out, and I landed on the seat. I opened my eyes immediately. The last time my left arm suddenly swelled, I was reading about an incubus and succubus, but I thought it was really weird. It was happening in a church. Yeah, the whole experience sounds really weird. So this is like a really good example of what I was just saying. I'm meeting a lot of these obviously Christian-centric characters that are really much more open-minded to concepts that Christians have historically been taught to be closed off to. I looked around me and noticed black smoke around the floor, almost as if it was a path. I checked around me, and nobody else had their eyes open in the church. My eyes followed the smoke to where it was thicker as I stood up beside my praying family and then saw it, a black, smoky spirit hovering in the church and attached to one of the fellow church members. It was huge, humanoid, and it looked like it was made of pure black smoke. It was looking directly at the person it was attached to. Then it suddenly turned towards me, as if it realized it was being watched. This gave me a fright, and I knocked my mother, who told me to keep quiet and pray without opening her eyes. That it then moved towards me at a fast speed and stopped right in front of me, its face in front of mine. I locked eyes with its black holes where its eyes should have been, and said in a whisper, "Leave me alone. Get out. Only God is allowed here." It was getting really mad, and the longer I looked at it, the weaker I got, and my legs gave in again. I fell on the chair. I felt myself get sicker and sicker, but I repeated myself in a whisper again. It gestured as if it was screaming at me. The prayer was coming to an end, and the pastor said, "Amen." Watched it fly outside the church door as it flung them open. The bang gave someone else a fright, and the people walking by were looking at the doors so confused. My mother looked at me in the chair, and she said I looked very pale and ill. She also noticed the swelling, and thankfully it was the end of the session. On the way home, I noticed the swelling in my arm go down as we were further from the church and whatever that spirit was. The same thing happened when I read about those demons. When I switched the book for the Bible, the swelling went away. Thanks for reading another one of my true stories, Ashley. Well, thank you for that story, Ashley. Yeah, it's been a while since I've put a church experience or a Christian experience in the show. I like to have one or two in here, especially to bolster an episode about the Satanic Panic. This one is from Corey. Now, Corey apparently has been trying very hard to get me to read his story on the show. He says that this is the third attempt. Well, I've got to your story now. Been a long-time subscriber, and when you started making these Art Bell-style podcasts, you inspired me to put my creepiest experience into writing. Well, that sounds amazing. You know what? No further ado, I'm just going to read the story for you. So he's given it to me in a PDF with photos. You know, unfortunately, I can't share the photos with you, but it's clearly a very industrial-looking space with very long pipes and smokestacks. G'day, Greg. I'm a longtime Aussie fan of yours, and I would love to submit one of the strangest and scariest things my mate and I both experienced whilst urban exploring together in my rural northeastern Queensland town. Oh, I do love Queensland. I think if I had to end up anywhere in Australia, I'd want to be in Brisbane. I found this coal coke producing facility known as the Coke Works. Made several trips there, climbing up the stairs and ladders to get to the Outlook Tower, which gives you a bird's eye view of the whole town and countryside. Oh, that's impressive. Well, that would definitely be a space I would want to urban explore as well. So I assume that observation tower is that sort of smokestack looking pipe. It's really just like two pipes. It's the most simple looking thing ever. One pipe going horizontally along the ground and then another pipe just going straight up. This place was established in 1933, running until 2016. And I started exploring the place in 2019. Oh, so it hasn't really even been defunct that long. I guess it really doesn't look that old. It is pretty rusty, though. This was one of the last times I've been there, and it is the last time I have been there at night. And because of what happened, I will never go there at night ever again. Ooh. This sounds interesting. Okay. I know this is going to be good. It was late. Avro. Aussie slang for afternoon. Okay. And I convinced my mate, Joe, to come hang out at the Coke Works. We would drink some rum and maybe some couple J's at the top of the tower, which is at least 50 to 100 meters in elevation. Well, that sounds like a pretty good night, not gonna lie. I do miss summer nights like that. Upon reaching the Coke Works, we squeezed through a gap in the fence, walked along grabbing a couple of fallen coconuts on the way. Are you making this up? Have you even been to Australia? Are there coconuts there? Come on. It's so funny. On the way there, the whole complex to get to a metal staircase that takes us halfway up the coke ovens. It took us a while to get there. The sun was gonna start setting soon, so we climbed up the stairs on the side of the coke oven and reached up to move a metal mesh floor panel for the catwalk attached to the top of the coke ovens above. Then we climbed up through the gap using the hand railing and the staircase to boost ourselves up. Now we were on top of the ovens, and we made our way across the overgrown oven tops and rail tracks. Now we carefully walked over the rickety floor panels to the staircase that echoed loudly and reverberated the whole structure with every step. Let's just see. A lot of this is descriptions of how the machine works. So yes, they finally get up to the top. I sat down, pulled out the rum and had some swigs and handed it to Joe. Sparked up the J when Joe had the bright idea to grab the coconuts and open them up with my knife. In less than a minute, Joe had cut himself deeply on one side of his hand, and his hand was dripping blood onto the metal floor panels and roof below. I scolded him for not using proper knife etiquette, poured some of the rum on his wound, and wrapped it in a towel from my bag. I joked about his luck to cut himself with one thing that wouldn't give him tetanus in the whole surroundings, but we had to climb down a ladder. I had to wait for Joe's wound to stop bleeding so he could hold on. It was now very dark when Joe's cut was sealed enough to climb down. We went down the ladders halfway down the echoey stairs when I remembered getting the feeling that someone was watching us, and the echoes of the staircase didn't sound right, like it wasn't in time with our steps, quite like it should be. Oh, that's interesting. So not only did you get an uneasy feeling that you're being watched, but you noticed that there was some sort of an environmental change. We had just reached the ground level when I told Joe to stop. He did so, and we heard the echoing and vibrations stop, until a few seconds passed, upon which slowly and quietly the echoes and footsteps and vibration of the staircase resumed just on the stairs above our head, getting closer. Jesus Christ, that sounds terrifying. So something was definitely following you. Oh my God. I told Joe, let's go, but don't run. As we squeezed through a broken chain link fence and that barricaded off the ground level access, still hearing the footsteps as we did this, we continued on the ground level, walking past the coke ovens, making a beeline for the perimeter fence, when Joe stopped and turned to look behind us towards the coke ovens. Joe immediately turned back. His face was pale. Then he got into a sprint for the exit. I couldn't see what he saw, and soon followed him, not wanting to be left behind. Oh my God, it's almost like it was following the scent of his blood or something. That's insane. Like, it follows, even. Once we had put some good distance between us and the coke works, Joe told me that he saw a pale-looking figure standing on top of the coke ovens before they ducked behind some pipes. This confirmed my suspicion. We were being followed by someone in the dark. What kind of person would be walking around a pitch-black complex without a torch? That's just not normal. It's like they had extraordinary night vision. It's almost like the blood from Joe's cut lured it in because we were a group of two. It was reluctant to get any closer. That's funny. That was literally my same theory. I'm sorry. I stole your thunder there by giving away your prediction. I've never really believed in cryptids or the paranormal, but this is the one experience that to this day still has me questioning what exactly was following us that night. If it was something paranormal, I don't know if it was a ghost or some sort of humanoid cryptid. Wow. Well, that was an incredible story. Thank you so much for sending that in 3 times. Sorry I didn't get to it sooner. It was a damn good story. Hi Greg, this is Heather. I'm a longtime fan of your content and really enjoy your podcast material. I just pop in an earbud and listen while I fix dinner or do laundry. Listening to your listener stories reminds me of my own strange encounter. I have only told a few people close to me about it, but I suppose I can tell you. And all your fans. Well, thank you so much, Heather. That's very kind of you. What I feel is the strangest part of my story is that I have forgotten about it more than once. The first time I've ever told the story out loud, I surprised myself with details that I just seemed to return to my mind. It kind of freaked me out. You know, that kind of happens with me too, with really bizarre memories. And I think that that's actually like a form of memory blacking out. That when something is so strange that your brain doesn't understand it, that it's sort of just like, it hides that information away from your regular access memory. But then when you actually sit there and think about that incident, then yeah, stuff that you hadn't remembered in like 20 years will pop up. Well, I don't know how old you are, but I'm pretty ancient, so that kind of thing happens to me sometimes. This was years ago, and I guess I subconsciously compartmentalized it until I was ready. Then I started listening to your podcast, and it came back to me all over again. It doesn't disturb me as much now, for some reason. Well, that's funny, actually, you know, one last interjection, but I think I already said this. But I said that about the Hat Man. When somebody wrote in a story about one of their shadow people encounters, so I started reminiscing about my Hat Man that I would see regularly. And that same thing happened to me too. I remembered all sorts of details about him that I hadn't thought about since I was like 10. Enough suspense, here I go. Around the year 2000, I was in high school and lived with my parents, my brother and sister. We lived out in the countryside, and without giving too much detail, it was within 40 miles of southwest of Fort Knox in Kentucky. The road we lived on was a 2-lane road that stretched out into the east into large plots of farmland. There was a cow field across the road from our house. Well, that is adorable. Several large crop fields to the east, and a stretch of woods to the south. There were very few houses around us for miles. Well, that kind of sounds ideal. Sounds beautiful. Out in the middle of nowhere, made for some great stargazing, which I enjoyed doing any clear night, oftentimes rather late. I do enjoy some stargazing late at night. It could be a little creepy with the distant sounds of coyotes and such, but it was also peaceful. We had a round above-ground pool in the backyard with an attached deck, and the back of the house faced the south. This particular night, I was the last person walking around, which wasn't unusual. It was close to midnight, around 11:30 p.m., and everyone was asleep. It was a beautiful, clear night, and the large glass doors overlooking the deck called to me. I stepped out into the deck and looked around, checking the area and studying the horizon, engaging in the previous mentioned stargazing. I noticed an odd lack of stars beyond a few particularly bright spots. At first, I dismissed the brighter stars as airplanes. However, the lack of any other stars confused me. There were 4 of these constant lights, equally distanced, that I followed with my eyes, making the shape of a square. This is when my perspective shifted and I became aware that something large and dark was in the air above me, blocking out the stars. Wow. That's terrifying. It was like that feeling you get when a spider dangles from the ceiling in front of your face. And at first, you're not sure what you're looking at until it comes into focus. Yeah, that's so beautifully said. Absolutely, vividly, beautifully said. It was so massive and silent that I hadn't been aware of it at first. I stared for a long time, blinking and unconvinced. I didn't feel any fear at all. I thought I should go wake someone up and show them this. I went inside and locked the doors and glanced at the clock, noticing it was a little after 3 a.m. Ooh, that is the witching hour. I was shocked I had been outside stargazing for so long and hurried off to bed. Oh, interesting. Do you think that you experienced lost time? Or did you really just lose track of time? That's right, I went to bed. I didn't think about it again until years later. I had moved out of my childhood home, and then I was going to college around 4 years later, listening to a friend of mine talk about aliens. I laughed and told her I had a UFO story. I told her the whole story. The part that worried me, though, as I mentioned at the beginning, is that when I reached the part about going back inside, I couldn't understand why I hadn't told anyone that night. That's as if there was a vague memory of seeing something, but only by speaking about it out loud did the full memory return. Oh, wow. That almost sounds like your memory was affected, though. Because why didn't you tell anyone? Like, why did you just get the urge to go inside and then go to bed? It's almost like you were given that command and you just did it. The first instance I realized that I had lost time during this encounter was while telling the story 4 years after. Okay, so lost time it is. What was I doing from 11:30 a.m. until 3 a.m. or p.m. I'm assuming 11:30 p.m. to 3 a.m. Why did I just go inside and go to bed without question? It honestly baffles me. I don't think my friend believed me, and since I have no proof, I could do nothing about the revelation. I was pretty unsettled by the whole thing, and I think I just let the memory fade until you dredged it up again. Oh no. Oh no, I almost feel bad, Heather. I'm sorry. This is my only UFO type encounter, but I do have a few other strange happenings from the same house that are more of the ghostly type, if you're interested. Oh, I'm absolutely interested. You're an excellent storyteller. I want to hear more stories. Feel free to send them in. I hope this wasn't too jumbled, and you found it at least a little entertaining. Well, actually, it was very easy to read, considering how dyslexic I am. Keep doing what you're doing, and thank you for reading my story, Heather. Thank you so much, Heather. That was spectacular. I'm sorry yet again, just like the last story, I kept jumping the gun and stealing my guest's thunder. Oh, God. Okay, I got one more in me before my voice gives out. Okay, it says, please keep anonymous. So I'm going to call this guy Chuck. Chuck here says, let me preface this with that I'm not a religious person. But at this point in my life, I was very focused on furthering myself in the Catholic faith. So that may have influenced my experience. Oh, interesting. Interesting. When I was a child, I had trouble being accepted by many of my peers. I was bullied and constantly told I would never succeed in my dreams by my own family. For a long time, in my childhood, I felt alone and helpless. Well, I know that you are absolutely not alone in that, Chuck. Not only is that a common thing in our community, but I absolutely mirror that experience. I would go into details, but let's just say it was the type of depression some people never overcome. I was having problems with my faith after several experiences that I thought would be life-changing proved to be hollow and unfulfilling. Long story short, I was having doubts. One day after reaching my breaking point, I went to speak with our local priest. He has passed now, but he was a great and kind man that genuinely cared for the people in our community. Still to this day, I hold the utmost respect for this man and owe him so much, even though I may not still believe in the religion he represented. I've actually met some very tolerant and open-minded pastors, preachers, ministers, what have you, that will speak to anybody with the exact same respect that they would speak to their favorite regular church attendee. For several nights before I went to speak with my father, I had been having very strange dreams. Every night after I would fall asleep, I would have strange dreams. I would wake up in my own bed, but my bed was outside in the front yard. I remember feeling happy for the first time in a long time. I wasn't just happy. I felt playful. I felt like I was having fun. I couldn't help but smile and laugh. I remember feeling innocent and safe. I felt like I was cared for and someone actually was there for me. For once, I felt like I mattered to someone. When I looked up at the night sky, a bright light appeared before me, brighter than any star in the sky. Within the light, I could see a glowing figure of a robed woman wearing a golden crown. I instantly recognized the woman as the Mother Mary. Oh, that sounds like an extremely vivid dream. My dreams are very rarely this vivid, but I can usually remember the emotions that I was feeling, and I've definitely never felt a dream where I felt like whimsical and childlike and playful before. So you have my attention. I couldn't help but laugh and giggle as I played a game of peekaboo with her. I would cover my face with my sheets for a few moments, giggling excitedly before throwing them off and laughing happily as I looked up at her hovering in the sky. Each time I threw the sheets off of myself and looked up at her, she simply shushed me and motioned for me to go back to sleep. When she did this, I could feel her speak in my mind. Go to sleep. Everything will be okay. You will be okay. It felt like the words echoed in my mind and in my very soul. Ooh, that kind of gave me goosebumps. I felt comfort like I had never felt before. The next thing I remember is laying on the concrete driveway in our front yard. I was spread out, looking up at the perfect twilight sky, where half of the sky was orange with the sun and the other was deep violet with the moon. I was awake. This was real. This was reality. At least it felt like it. I was groggy, as if I had just woken up. Was that a dream? Was any of that real? Still to this day, I don't know. After that, all I could do was go inside, head up to my bedroom, and fall asleep. My life continued as normal after that. I still think about this story to this day and wonder if it was just a dream or if it was a real experience. I'm agnostic now, but this experience has followed me for almost 20 years, making me question everything about myself and about reality. Wow. Thank you so much for that story, Chuck. That was incredible. That sort of does remind me. I do have one vivid experience that's very similar to that, where it seems like in my memory, like it should be a dream. Like that's how I've categorized it. But when I relive it, it's not like reliving a dream. It's like reliving something that I really experienced. And the way I remember it in its experience was something that really happened to me. Maybe I will tell that story to you one day. I build up the nerve. Damn it, everybody. Great stories again. Thank you so much for contributing. Just another amazing night. Thank you, everybody, for joining me tonight. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting the channel. I have a separate Patreon again for the Full Metal Tuxedo podcast. $5 gets you access to the Discord. Thank you, everybody listening at home. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for supporting my work and listening to me ramble for 2 or 3 hours about whatever random crap comes into my crazy head. You guys are amazing. You're all absolute legends. I love you guys. Thank you very much. Have a good night. See you in 2 weeks.